The Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
That same day, Jesus went out to the house and sat beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into the boat and sat there, while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on the rocky ground, where they did not have much soil. They sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and brought grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what is sown in the heart. That is what was sown on the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet such a person has no root, but endures only for a while, and when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, the person immediately falls away. As for what was sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the lure of wealth choke the word, and it yields nothing. But as for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and another 30. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
You may be seated. Today's gospel makes me think of a time when I worked at a CSA farm in Wisconsin, in central Wisconsin, in the northern Kettle Moraine area. And it was, CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. It was an organic farm, and people could pay for shares to receive a box of produce weekly in the summer and in the fall. Or you could take time and work at the farm to receive the produce through the work, and the pay was from the work you did. So I chose to do this. I thought it would be a great experience for me and for our boys who were young and in elementary at that time. Being a city girl, this was a little bit out of my comfort zone, but I thought I'd give it a shot. I got to go into the fields and pitch lots of rocks. It was a rocky area. And I weeded many things, and I planted plants, and I boxed produce, and many other things. I found out that farming is very hard work. The boys, while I was in the fields, hung out with a retired farmer, and they would go into the chicken coop and collect eggs, and they would help put wood in the boiler, and they would play with the cats in the barn, and they would play with other kids. And it was a really wonderful experience for all of us, and I really gained a great understanding of what is entailed in farm work. But beside gaining experience with farm work, what I liked even more were the people that I met and the stories that they held. They were interns from all over the country who came to help at this farm. There were people also that came that just wanted a new start in life and wanted to get their hands dirty and get into the dirt. And there were people who were retired farmers or farmers that had lost their jobs or lost their farms in the 80s. And then there were families like our own, and we all came together and worked this land, and it was a beautiful experience. I heard stories of people that walked in hard paths of prejudice, paths where not much grows, where life and opportunities are too quickly taken away. I heard other stories of people who knew what it was like to live between a rock and a hard place, where life withers because you can't put down roots, where there's no security or stability and the sun scorches. Some shared stories of walking among the thorns of violence, fear, anger, and poverty. Thorns that wrapped around them and their families, choking away dignity, security, and trust. And I also heard stories of hope where people stood in dark, rich soil that nourished life, hope, and joy, and love. We all know the different landscapes that Jesus talks about in his parable. We know the beaten path of life. We've stumbled through the rocky patches of our own lives. We've been scratched and cut by thorns of life. And we have planted our roots deep in blessed soil of life that feeds and grows us to become a harvest of God's love for others. There's always room for interpretation in parables. In the parable of the sower, we can think of Jesus just describing different types of soil or just different types of life situations. But another way to look at it is describing our own inner landscaping. We are rarely just one type of soil. We are all 4 types of soil at one time or another. The 4 soils in the parable are descriptive of how we live and relate to others and to God. Jesus' interpretation of the parable, when he tells what happens to the seeds, describes the consequences of different life situations. At one level, the parable invites us to be self-reflective and examine the kind of life that we're living right now. And I think that's how many people think of this parable of the sower. So the parable sometimes can get limited as well. We ask maybe one question: what kind of dirt are you? In doing so, we put ourselves at the center of the parable and we put the sower in the background. The what kind of dirt are you question is not the only way to read this parable. We tend to read and try to understand parables through the lens of our own experiences and our own viewpoints. But sometimes the result is that we may hear, but we may not understand, or we may see, but we may not be able to perceive. The parable of the sower doesn't make sense in our world today. A farmer goes out and sows seeds in a public path on rocky ground and among the thorns. That seems to be wasteful, inefficient, and ineffective. It's bad farming. That seems the sower is not much of a farmer. You can't plant seeds among rocks and thorns or on a hard path and be surprised or act surprised and complain that nothing has grown. The story Jesus tells simply does not work with our understanding of how we do things now. But to know that is the beginning of understanding this parable. Parables offer different perspectives and a different worldview, a different way of looking at our world. They give us a glimpse of God's world and how God is working in our lives. The surprising generosity of God's love and grace is revealed in this parable today. As different as the 4 soils are, they all hold 2 things in common. There are seeds and there's a sower. The sower sows the same seeds in all soil with equal work, equal hope, and equal generosity. The sower does this without assessment of the soil's quality or potential. There is no soil left unsown. No ground is declared undeserving of the sower's seeds. This is not about the quality of the dirt. It's not about the quality of the person. It's about the quality of God, the sacred sower. We want to judge what kind of dirt we are. God simply wants to sow God's life in ours. No life, no person, no soil is left unsown. Seeds here, seeds there, seeds everywhere. That just seems like poor planning and wasteful. By today's farming practices, that would be judged as careless and inefficient. With the cost of seeds and the time spent sowing, it may not even be profitable. But these are not the sower's concerns. These are our concerns. Thankfully, the parable is about God's faithfulness and not about farming, soil quality, and how things work in this world. In the sower's world, wastefulness gives to hope, inefficiency to love, and no profit to generosity. Every part of your life has been sown with the seeds of God, and you know what happens to seeds. Given the right condition, apple seeds become apple trees, which bear apples to eat. And God's seeds become God's love for us to spread to others. As we travel through our summer days, may we generously spread God's love even in places where we think it might not be worth our time and effort. And may we live in gratitude for a gracious God who generously spreads seeds everywhere. Amen.